Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. Now this is going to be a video I was tagged for about a month ago. I'm so sorry it took me so long. If you have tagged me in like manga tag videos, I have seen them. I will get to them. I've just been really busy, but I'm trying to dedicate this next week or so to actually getting through all of them, so look forward to those in the next couple weeks. But this one is one that I actually found really interesting. It's a tag sort of started by Manga Hoarder, or Laura, if you are more familiar with her videos. A wonderful YouTuber who is honestly, like, she knows so much about the manga industry, and incredible. But her manga tag that she developed, I don't know if it's necessarily a manga tag, but what she started was manga to read in pairs video. These are series that are paired with either other manga or prose or other various books to give you a better, fuller understanding of the series, or just sort of an interesting aside that may enrich your experience reading the series. And those are the guidelines that I sort of followed. Some of them are actually pretty directly influential to the series, but some of them are less so. But in either case, I hope this is somewhat interesting. And I haven't chosen like two manga series to read together just because whilst I could do that, I couldn't really think of anything, at least within my collection. So yes, I hope my prose choices are somewhat interesting to you guys, and hopefully opens you up to maybe reading a little wider of some stuff for better understanding of the influence that written media has on culture across the world. But rather than spend too long, I'll just get straight into it, and I hope you guys enjoy. First of all is the manga series Black Butler, a series that I try to encourage people to read. I think it is one that a lot of people don't give enough credit to just because of fan reputation, which is not a great, guys, try things before you make assumptions. But anyway, the prose that I have decided to pair, or think that would be really important to pair up with this series, is Faust by Goethe. I talk about this manga series being very Faustian all the time. If you've seen any of my videos where I talk about Black Butler, I talk about Faust quite a bit. And the Faustian agreement or pact is what did actually start from this poem. It is a German poem, and it basically recounts a deal with the devil and how that doesn't work out for the individual. It's very much a self-ruination sort of thing. It's a cautionary tale about how getting everything that you want or wish for doesn't necessarily mean that that isn't a good thing, basically. So, of course, Black Butler, having this similar premise of someone making a deal with the devil in order to gain something, is, of course, directly influenced by this idea that Faust really presents. If you haven't read this, there's a lot of different translations of this poem. I actually do really like this one. Goethe is a very provocative poet. He certainly knows how to use his words, and I find this translation really does reflect the lyricism of the poem itself, but that's neither here nor there. The story is the same regardless of translation, but I do find that translation lends itself to a lot of interpretation. So yes, if you want a more full understanding of what I might necessarily be talking about with Black Butler and what this sort of premise um can do and has achieved through literature and throughout history already in, within our collective culture, then this is a good place to start because it really is the fundamental deal with the devil sort of story. And Black Butler really, I mean, if you've read Faust, there's a lot of influences. I think it's sort of very, very. It is, of course, not the same story, but you can definitely see where this, how this poem has established certain tropes within this this storyline and setting. So yes, if you are a fan, I do recommend the poem. It is broken into two parts. Both parts are indicative and good to read, although I think the first is maybe a little more relevant. But they're both good, so read both. They're both good, so just read it. Next is another manga that I talk a lot about, and that is Princess Jellyfish by Akiko Higashimura. And the prose that I decided to choose for this one is probably a book that nobody has heard of. Whereas Faust is very, very well known culturally. This is somewhat of an unknown. Maybe you guys know it. Maybe you don't. I don't know. But this is Eric Newby's Something Wholesale, My Life and Times in the Rag Trade. So it chronicles Newby's year within the fashion industry. It is very, very sharp, very comedic. He has a very, very humorous style, self-reflective humor. So it does actually remind me quite a bit of the humor of Princess Jellyfish in that it's more so of the making fun of themselves in a kind way, but very, very, very biting critique on the fashion industry and sort of the ridiculousness of the fashion industry as a whole. So, like I said, I have a lot of familial experience with the fashion industry. I've mentioned it before, but both my parents were in the rag trade. That's how they met. So I have maybe a bit more knowledge on this topic than a lot of people do. But Newby he's chronicling his experiences from the mid to late 80s. So it's not exactly necessarily reflective of how fashion is done now. But a lot of things that, the fashion industry changed a lot in the 90s when manufacturing completely moved to China. Before then, of course, most clothes were made in the same country that they were sold in, which Princess Jellyfish sort of covers a little bit. They're trying to just market towards the Japanese, but then they realized that they'd have to move manufacturing to a much cheaper location to actually establish themselves within the community. And both of these stories do actually address that, although the shift hadn't moved to China yet in Something Wholesale. But yeah, just the entire fashion culture and the people within that culture. This is a very hard look at both at those people in both of these stories. So whilst it's not necessarily you don't really necessarily gain a huge amount directly from Something Wholesale, I do think that if you like the humor and if you're interested in reading a little bit more about sort of domestic fashion industries, then Newby's books are really good. This one in particular, but he has also written other things. This is a very old book. This is I'm pretty sure my mom and dad bought this when it was first released. So, I don't know, guys. But yes, so if you're wanting a little bit more on the rag trade or sort of the industry in general, and you sort of become intrigued from Princess Jellyfish, this is probably a good one to read. It's not too long either, as you can tell. Next is another series, or another choice that I don't think like directly influence each other, but is very, very reminiscent of each other, and I think if you like one, you will probably enjoy the other. And that is My Hero Academia, of course, the upbeat shonen series about in-training superhero high schoolers. And a story about our main character who doesn't actually have a super quirk or power of his own until he comes across his sort of mentor and like favorite hero, and he gains what it is to become heroic. Although he always possessed the qualities of heroism, he finally gains an actual power pretty early on in the story, and that changes his life, but it doesn't change who he is fundamentally. Now, my choice of to read with this or paired up would be The Rest of Us Just Live Here by Patrick Ness, a author that I really enjoy. His trilogy, the Chaos Walking trilogy. I've enjoyed pretty much everything that I've read of his, but this follows a high school student, a teenager, who lives in a reality where everybody is some sort of hero, has some destiny to fulfill. His best friend is like a wolf god, and everybody's saving the world. There's very special individuals that the world sort of revolves around, and then the rest of them just live there. They don't have powers, they just have to put up with like the craziness that is living in a reality where there are people with powers and you know, prophecies and destinies need to be fulfilled, and you know, supervillains are attacking schools and all that sort of thing, whilst he himself doesn't have anything really to do with any of that. But ultimately, it does, again, explore what truly makes a hero and whether or not that is a power or fated destiny. So if you like My Hero Academia and you're looking for a new book to read, this is a good one. I really do like Ness's writing. I think it's he's very funny and he's very engaging. And like you can see, it's not a thick book. It's not hard to get through. So yes, I'm sure it's one that most people can read pretty quickly. And yeah, they're pretty similar. So I thought they'd work well together. Next is another series I talk endlessly about because I adore it, and the thing I paired it up with is probably more obvious than the last two, but this is Requiem of the Rose King by Aya Kano, the dramatic retelling of the Wars of the Roses, and follows Richard and Henry throughout that period and sort of how things interact. It's very tragic. It is very, 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 very good. But if you read this series, you will notice that it says based on Henry VI and Richard III by William Shakespeare. So that is what I'm actually going to recommend. And this is my copy of the complete works of William Shakespeare. If you have another one that you have, that's great. I got this for $2 in a secondhand book sale, garage sale, whatever it was. But yes, both Richard III and Henry VI are very well known in culture thanks to William Shakespeare. They did have a very major role in the War of the Roses, but like most historical individuals, they wouldn't necessarily have the popularity and the recognition that they do now if Shakespeare hadn't written a play about them. So, this story here is much more influenced by Shakespeare's works than necessarily the actual historical happenings, the historical contents of the events. Of course, Shakespeare does cover real events in both plays, but everything is dramatized, and both of them are tragedies. So you get a pretty good idea of what to expect in this series if you know any of Shakespeare's tragedies, especially if you know these particular plays. And really, these, I mean, whilst Kana really does have her own spin on the entire sort of story and characters and all of that, if you want plot spoilers, one, history has that covered, but two, maybe don't read these plays quite yet, because, and if you don't want to know spoilers, then don't read these plays because it will spoil everything. But it's pretty well known how these two real life individuals lived and sort of their lives over their rule. So, in saying that, do not get confused by King Henry IV or King Henry V. We were talking about King Henry VI. Shakespeare did write multiple plays about multiple different Henrys, and we were talking about the life and death of King Richard III, not the life and death of King Richard II. Again, totally different individuals, but plays with very, very similar names. And as we all know, the British royalty love to use the same names over and over again. At least with the individuals that anybody has any knowledge of any recollection of. There are some very, very strong names that pop up and up and up and up and up again over and over in European history, and Richard and Henry are two of those. But yes, if you actually were very interested in Requiem of the Rose King and you're not put off by Shakespeare, definitely read those plays. They're very good. They're very, very good reads, although they're not necessarily his most well-known work. Of course, everybody knows Macbeth, everybody knows Romeo and Juliet, everyone knows Hamlet, everyone knows A Midsummer Night's Dream. But, I mean, Shakespeare has endured for so long for good reason. And I would definitely recommend both of those plays for a more full understanding and appreciation of this series. Although, again, you don't necessarily have to read this to understand this, but it's good. It helps you, and you should expand your reading. So I hope you guys give it a shot if you're a fan of Kano's Rose King. And finally is a choice that's a little more academic in nature. And that is, the book I chose is Passionate Friendship, The Aesthetics of Girls' Culture in Japan. This is actually a textbook written by Deborah Shamoon about basically how female media and women in media and the shoujo sort of revolution and how manga and sort of the culture changed so dramatically during the 20th century and most notably the 70s, and how that still influences sort of everything today, which is not something that I think a lot of people really think about all that often. But this is actually a university textbook, technically. It's quite easy to find, though. It's not like super difficult. But the thing I've paired it with is like, it's so lazy, but basically any 70s shoujo manga like you can think of. I have so many, but here are some that I think most of you know that I own. The 70s was such a important time of change within the manga community, and this book really gives you a more like a fuller history of what was happening, the authors who really did change things, the female authors who were sort of pushing the boundaries of what manga could be, and, you know, the shoujo culture within Japan, how it was viewed and how it influenced, you know, the boys' culture and just all culture, all the culture. I wish we had Rose of Versailles in English already. Udon, I'm waiting, because that would be the perfect thing to pair with this, because honestly, Rose of Versailles is still one of the most influential manga there is, full stop. And this book really explains why and how that came about, and sort of the shift that was needed. So yes, this is, again, not a long book. None of these I have recommended are long. So there, you should be able to, if you did want to read them, you can get through them very, very quickly. But I honestly think if you want a better understanding of sort of Japanese media culture in general, you should really know a bit more about the history of just the history of the things you enjoy, and how what was created in the past influences the present, and how things you may not even realize happen or influence really do. It's just something subconscious that you just accept, but you don't really think about why or how, like why it's different from Western media and how that changes the perception. So yes, if you're wanting to know more about this period of time, I recommend this book. If you are a fan of 70s shoujo, I recommend this book. If you're just anyone, I recommend this book. So yes, I hope I've encouraged some of you to read this. It is a very, very, very good read. But that is everything. Thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you, Laura, for tagging me. I'm sorry it took me so long to actually get to it. Please forgive me. As for tagging other people, I'm going to leave it up to you. But I do want to say I hope that Laura Moon and Whimsical Pictures do this. I'm not sure if Whimsical has done this. I can never remember. I feel like she has, but I don't know. I don't know. But if you haven't, please, Ray, I would love to hear your choices, as well as you, Lara. It would be great to see. It's a little bit difficult, but I liked being able to think about it, and hopefully it was somewhat interesting to you guys. There are a lot of things that I think you can gain a lot of just larger understanding of written stuff, written media, whether it be comics or novels. It's always, I value being well read very highly. I think it's very important to read a lot, and whether or not that's, you know, whatever's popular at the moment, or classic stuff, or just genre stuff, whatever. I think it's important to have a larger view and better taste and perception, and better reasoning for building an argument to why you like or dislike something. But hopefully, if any of you are fans of these series, you may give these choices a try. Like I said, if you are going to do this, you can choose manga to pair with other manga. I personally didn't do that just because I have a lot, like, it would probably take me even longer to think through it and reason it well in a substantial way, so I didn't want to spend too long on my choices. The ones that I spoke about today were pretty obvious choices for me, so yeah, if you have something that is sort of a little more abstract, but you can reason it really well, I'd love to read a comment about that. That would be really, really good. And I hope this encourages discussion because I think in the manga community, books as a whole are. I mean, manga is a very different sort of thing from books. You don't necessarily have to enjoy reading to enjoy manga, but I definitely think that reading is something you should cherish and encourage in people. So yes, that's just my 2 cents on it. But thank you so much for such an interesting prompt, Manga Hoarder. This was really, really fun, and I hope everyone else enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video, guys. Bye till then.